Starting things right. I think it's important always that we start things right, but it's kind of one of those things that not only do we start things right on the right foundation, always want to start out not only in the right foundation, we want to keep going in the right direction. There's some reasons that Christ has warned. He warned his disciples, and then through the gospel writers, he warns us that we have to be careful of the yeast of the Pharisees, right? The yeast of the Pharisees, the yeast of the Sadducees, the yeast of the Herodians, the yeast of Herod. Because we can start things out on a good foundation and a good right thing, and really quickly things can wiggle free, can't they? There's a lot of analogies that we could do. I like building stuff. Not that I'm any good at it, but I do like building stuff. And it's kind of one of those things that I can build something and it starts out pretty straight, right? And then it's a quarter inch off here and a quarter inch off there, and pretty soon straight isn't so straight, right? I reminded once of a ladder that I had to climb in the Ukraine. And it looked like it had been built with my construction ability. It was two really long boards with some boards nailed between it. And it looked pretty good, but I'm not sure that they did their math quite as well, or that the wood was quite as straight as it was. And it got to a point where the ladder kind of did one of those things where you lean it up on a wall, and one side would stand up, and the other one would kind of out like that. So as you're climbing up, it turns out to be a spiral staircase instead of a ladder. Yeah, just a little bit off, and we can suddenly be pretty far off our mark. Pretty far off our mark. That's the idea of sin, right? Sin comes from that Hebrew idea, that archery idea of missing the mark, right? If you're trying to hit something and you don't hit it, that's sin. That's somebody will always like to compare sin. Well, that's a big sin, that's a small sin, and I'm always like, well, if you missed, you missed. They're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, imagine you're a tightrope walker. It doesn't matter if you're a foot off the rope or a mile off the rope, you're still not on the rope. That's the deal. And one of those things is we see that the starting of the church, and really a lot of people when they look at the starting of the church, they'll look at the Great Commission where Jesus says, all power and authority has been given to me, therefore go and make disciples. And they'll say that that's kind of the start of the church, but actually I kind of think the church was even started before that. It starts with that profession that we saw last week when Jesus said, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter's like, "You're the Christ." And they lock on right there, and he's like, "Okay, great. Now that you know that, come on in. I'm going to give you the teaching. I'm the Christ, absolutely. And guess what's going to happen? I'm going to die." Right? I do have all the power that you think that I have. I have all the ability that you think I have. I have all the knowledge that you think I have. And because I have all that power, and because I have all that goodness, I am going to go and die for you. And they're like, no, there's surely an easier way, right? Peter's like, hey, God, maybe you're new to this, I know. Right? He comes in. Well, when we look here in chapter 9, is we actually see the birth of kind of that church. And really it's a picture of, there's another thing that we're supposed to see a parallel in this. When Moses comes down off the mountain, right? When he comes down with the Ten Commandments, comes down to see what's happened when he left the children of Israel while he was up there getting the Ten Commandments, he comes down. We're supposed to, when we read Mark chapter 9, we're supposed to see the parallel. Because there is a parallel. Because he's been up there on the hill for 6 days, and he's going to come down, and what is he going to find when he comes down and looks at the church? So let's go ahead and open our Bibles. I like the first section right here. I like to call this one. This is a good quote, I thought. This one's not in the Bible, but this is it's kind of. This is a paraphrase of something Peter's going to say. Jesus, it sure is lucky that you have me here. When you think about church, sometimes I think sometimes we might approach church that way. God, it sure is fortunate that I have the gift to be able to do this sort of thing. How many times have you showed up and somebody needed somebody that was good at something and you happen to be good at that one thing? You're like, boy, it sure is good. Boy, the church really needed to have somebody that knew how to install a wall heater, and I happen to know how to. Sure is lucky for God to have me here. No, all right? So let's go ahead and start out. We'll open our Bibles into Mark chapter 9. This is verse 2. This is, again, the NLT. 6 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain to be alone. As the men watched, Jesus' appearance was transformed and his clothes became dazzling white, far whiter than any earthly bleach could ever make them. Then Elijah and Moses appeared and began talking with Jesus. Peter exclaimed, "Rabbi, it is wonderful for us to be here. Let us make 3 shelters as memorials, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He said this because he didn't really know what else to say. For they were all terrified. When in doubt, say whatever comes to the top of your head, right? No, maybe this is descriptive, not prescriptive, right? Just because Peter did it, we don't want to just blurt out anything that necessarily comes to the top of our head. Well, we see some amazing things. First of all, there's some parallels here. Moses and Elijah both do the same kind of thing. Moses went up to the top of the mountain with, anybody know? Who did he go up to the mountain with?
Elijah?
Well, Moses went with, did you say Joshua?
I said Elijah.
Well, he's there right now. Moses went to the mountain with Joshua and transfers his authority to Joshua, and then is seen no more before they enter the promised land. Elijah goes to the mountain, right, with Elijah and Elisha, right? So Elijah goes to the mountain with Elisha. And then, of course, he's taken up the chariot of fire. Right? Sweet, whoa, sweet. Right, that's what we see right there, right? But what we see here is we see also a couple pictures. We see that these guys, these men also, they all went in there at the end of their ministry to pass it on over to the next generation to lead. Moses to Joshua for actually taking the land. Elijah to Elisha. Elisha goes in and there's a revival in the land under Elisha, right? We see that kind of that push forward. We see some kids get eaten by bears too, but if you're wondering about that story, that's in there. We'll get to that maybe next year. All right, here you go. So there's some parallels here. First of all, I love the fact that they're representative of the law and the prophets. All of them are pointing to Jesus. All of them are pointing to Jesus. All authority is pointing to Jesus. So you see kind of a passing of the torch, if you will. Passing of the torch to Jesus. Of course, it's really Jesus assuming the torch, that they were pictures of him. In the book of Hebrews, we see that clue, we see that thrown out there, the idea that, hey, listen, everybody that we see in the Old Testament, it's all pointing to Jesus. So the things that they did well were pointing to Jesus. That's kind of the deal. So we got the passing of the torch. That's what we're supposed to see here. But we see more than that. We see more than a passing of the torch. We really see for kind of a fulfillment of their ministry. And then Jesus is, some people will call this the transfiguration. This is the point where, boom! We totally know. We said before that Jesus was the Christ. Boom, we've seen it. These guys have seen it, right? So surely they're not going to mess it up anymore, right? Then a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my dearly loved Son. Listen to him." Suddenly they looked around. Moses and Elijah were gone, and they saw only Jesus with them. Now, a lot of people, when they preach this, they point out the fact that Peter opened his mouth and God had to shut him up. I think that's a little unfair, because at least the author, at least Mark points out, hey, listen, he's terrified. He didn't know what to do. You have to excuse Peter. He really didn't know how to act, right? I wouldn't know. That's kind of it. I wouldn't know how to act either. So you're like, he said something silly, but he was trying. It was a pregnant pause. He had to do something, right? So, but what we have really here is we have God the Father encouraging and saying, here we go. This is my dearly loved son. Listen to him. Suddenly, when they looked around, Moses and Elijah were gone, and they saw only Jesus with them. Here's the deal. Everything that they thought great about Moses was more so, abundantly more so in Jesus. Everything they thought great about the great prophet Elijah was more so in Jesus Christ. They didn't need it. It's not like, oh boy, if only we had those two hanging out here. Boy, we were three, now we're just you. No. It's the real deal. It's the fulfillment. Jesus is the fulfillment. As they went back down the mountain, he told them not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. What's that mean he has to do for him to rise from the dead? Boy, he seems to be beating that drum a lot, doesn't he? So they kept it to themselves, for they often asked each other what he meant by raising from the dead. Surely he can't mean raising from the dead, because that would mean that he's dead. Then they asked him, why do the teachers of the religious law insist that Elijah must come before the Messiah comes? I like that. That's just crazy talk. Jesus keeps doing that. Jesus, this is just crazy talk. Right? Isn't that's what Peter said the first time. He said, you're the Christ. He said, great, you know I'm the Christ. I'm here in all my power and all my glory to die on the cross. Not just crazy talk, Jesus. Here, it's the same sort of thing. He's like, hey, I'm going to go die. I'm going to have to rise from the dead. Then you can tell people. And they're like, let's change the subject. What is it again about Elijah? What's this whole thing? And Jesus responds, Elijah is indeed coming first to get everything ready. Yet why do the scriptures say that the Son of Man must suffer greatly and be treated with utter contempt? But I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they chose to abuse him, just as the scriptures predicted. In this way, he's talking about the office of Elijah was held by John the Baptist. He was doing to make way. He was doing Elijah's mission to get him ready. There's also, by the way, a statement that, you know what, Jesus is going to ascend, but there's going to be a day that he'll come back. And we may, hint, we may see Elijah show up again. Elijah may show up in the third act. Just wait. If we get to Revelation, we'll see that. But there's this whole thing, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. But what Jesus is trying to do is he's trying to say, hey, listen, God, the way that we work is even bigger than you're thinking. They were looking at somebody to come in and stomp the bad guys. God, now that you're here, can you go out and stomp all the bad guys? You're the Christ, you got a sword, go zap them. They don't understand, first of all, that they're the bad guys too. Jesus is slowly teaching them. Because his goal is not to zap the bad guys. His goal is to make a way for the bad guys to be redeemed. To let the bad guys join the good guys. So this comes into the second.
Or the good guy.
What's that?
Or the good guy.
Or the good guy, singular. Very good.